So hello everyone and welcome to Ibi Speaks. My name is Ibi and sorry for the little delay. So in today's episode, we will be talking about pathways to live and work legally in the United States of America. And my special guest is Frances Wokoro, a licensed United States attorney. So while in practice, she specialized in immigration law. She also holds a master's degree in international law and diplomacy and a BA honors in linguistics. She's currently a vice president AML compliance officer at Citibank USA. And she is the founder and president of Impact Giving USA, a nonprofit organization focused on supporting economic growth and development initiatives for underserved societies or communities in the United States of America and sub-Saharan Africa. She is also the founder and president of the Gender Development Service, GDS, a nonprofit organization charged with empowering women's economic and political development in Africa. Frances, that's amazing. Now, before I delve into this conversation, I want to say this. I want to issue this disclaimer that, what is it now? Yes, so I want to say that information provided on this channel today should not be construed or relied upon as a legal service for any specific circumstances or situations or facts. The content is provided free by Attorney Frances Wokoro, and the information provided is solely for information and purposes only. And viewing this particular episode doesn't create an attorney-client relationship with my guest in any way, shape, or form. And you shouldn't act or rely on any of the information contained without seeking professional or legal advice. Frances, is that okay?
Yes, that is, Ibi.
Frances, we're talking about the pathways to living legally in the United States of America. But before we delve into that conversation proper, I just want to thank all my viewers and subscribers for joining us today. I just want to say that I'm very grateful and I am delighted that you're here. So thank you so much. And if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, please subscribe. It's Ibinabo Enebi. Frances, before we go deep into the conversation, I want to start with this very simple but very important question. What's the biggest immigration mistakes that people make?
Yeah, so thank you. And I also want to welcome all the viewers to today's topic. Immigration, I should say, is a huge thing. You know, it's something that people all over the world do all the time. The world goes round because of immigration, and many countries, especially the West, appreciate talent coming in to their country to fill up spaces that are otherwise lacking. I would have preferred to do the kind of talk first before those mistakes, because maybe in the process I will be able to answer those questions. But I can say right away that most of the mistake, the most useless, I should say, mistake is relying on your application for visa, whether it's a non-immigrant visa or an immigrant visa, and thinking that you will not be caught. That is a huge mistake. I've seen occasions where people, each time they make application to the US Embassy or to any other embassy, they change stuff. They change their date of birth, they change their personal information, like their marital status or how many kids they have, things like that. And it usually comes back to by the person where they don't like. So that's one huge mistake I can just think of at the top of my head. Second of all is, thinking that migration to any part of this world is easy. It's not an easy process. It's right away, it can tell you it's long, it's odious, it's emotionally tasking, and it's expensive as well. So, thinking that, okay, I want to come to the US and work and live here and make it and stuff like that. And you think, I'm just going to rush things. You end up making a lot more mistakes than usual. There's no easy pathway to migration to any country at all, whether it be a family-based migration, like if a family member filed for you or an employer files for you, those things take a long time. So you need a lot of patience in order to navigate the waters of immigration. Another mistake I see people make is in maybe coming in as a visitor, coming in with a non-immigrant visa, and then overstaying, and then trying to adjust their status afterwards. That's how a lot of people end up becoming illegal. We're not supposed to be using that word anymore, but US immigration still uses it, So, but the preferred term is undocumented. People come in maybe through non-migrant visa, or they come as students or whatever, and then they overstay, and they're trying to adjust their status here. It's very limited ways of adjusting once you've overstayed your visa, which is 6 months. So even if you get, okay, this one, even if you have 2 years, my mom made the mistake sometime, right? If you get a 2 years visa, it doesn't mean that you can come in here and stay for 2 years, right? It just means that you have 2 years to enter severally with multiple entry visa. So you can only stay a maximum of 6 months. So I remember, many years back, I think in the 90s or so, my mom came to the US to visit my brother, and she didn't actually overstay. She stayed 6 months, and then went. My other brother in Canada invited her over, and she went to Canada and spent 6 months, and then went back to Nigeria. So that's a total of 1 year. But when you're leaving, when you're exiting the US or any of the Western countries, don't actually stamp your passport with an exit stamp. So the only stamp you have to rely on are the stamps in Nigeria when you get in. So when the visa expired, she wanted to travel again, and then she went to the embassy, and then they said, oh, you overstayed your visa, because the officer that was interviewing her didn't see her entry stamp in Nigeria, and then her entry stamp into Canada. So, and she said, well, I had 2 years, so I could have stayed more. She said, no visa for you. So I had to get a friend of mine who is a lawyer in Nigeria, and she wrote the embassy, explained everything, and said, oh, we're sorry, she can come back for that. So people need to understand, if you have a 6 month, if you have a 2-year visa, multiple entry visa, you can only stay 6 months at a time when you come here. Another mistake is people coming here often to trade. I've heard of people who came here, and they have this 2-year multiple entry visa, and they're coming like 6-7 times in a year, and they're buying stuff. And then, at the end of the day, I've seen people who were bad for 10 years from entering the US for that. So that's just a few that I can think about right now. But I hope I'll be able to address some of the issues in the process of the show.
Well, Frances, listen, there's something that you said that hit me like a ton of bricks. And a lot of times, like, people don't really know it, but I wrote it down that, when you talked about is what's the easiest and the fastest route or route of living and working in the United States of America. And you say that it is a very, it is not, there's no easy and fastest way. And you said that it is emotionally tasking. And people do not understand the degree or the magnitude of the emotional task that waiting for a legal documentation entails, that it drains you and it exhausts you emotionally. And for me, I think you have hit the nail on the head when you said that. And I also like when you say that sometimes when people have visas, they would say, well, I have 2 years visas to stay, to come to America. And they feel that they can actually stay for 2 years and then come back. So thank you very much for clarifying that. And thank you also for falsification of this other think about falsification of facts. You sometimes when people are desperate to leave the country, they would falsify details about themselves and then feel that when they come over that everything just goes. So you've just made us to realize that it is not so, that there are consequences. So thank you very much for straight off the block, telling us the do's and the don'ts. Now, the next thing I want us to do, and I want everyone to please pay attention, is I'd like you to now tell us about the pathways of living and working in the United States of America legally. And Frances, I'm not going to ask you any more questions because I want to learn from you as well. So I want us to, now what I want you to know that I have two sets of audience. I have people that are living in Nigeria, I have people living in Nigeria and people that live abroad in Ireland or in the UK and stuff like that. So in answering these questions, I also want you to bear in mind those listeners as well. So.
Okay. Bearing in mind there are people on this channel listening who are in the US and people who are outside of the US, I'm just going to give a general overview. There are two ways that one can migrate to the US. And when I talk about migration, I mean even adjusting status within the US, even while you're here. The first way is family-based. So in a situation where a spouse files for you, or you are the child, an unmarried child of a US citizen and you're under the age of 21, or you're the parent of a US citizen who is at least 21 years of age. Let me explain that. So your husband or wife can file for you if they're a US citizen, and if they are also a permanent resident. For permanent residency, it takes a while longer because you fall into what we call a preference category. So, but for US citizens, it's immediate, okay? So that's the quickest way. This quickest way actually takes about 2 years or more. In the past few years, when Trump was here, he tried to stop a lot of legal migration to the US, and the pandemic hit and all that. I have a friend of mine who is Nigerian, but she's also Irish. And her daughter turned 21 in 2018 and filed for her. It was a 4-year process for her, and she just got her immigrant visa 2 days ago. So that's to tell you, and I know that that delay was caused by the pandemic and all that, but normally it takes about 2 years because it's a two-step process, right? So the US citizen, spouse or parent or child files here domestically in the US. They file a form we call the I-130. They file that form with the US immigration here. It takes about a year or so, before they approve it. Once they approve it, they then send it to the embassy of the person's country of origin. And that's where you do the consular process, and they invite you for interview and all that. All that process from start to finish normally could take about 2 years. But in these times, the immigration here is backlogged and all that. It's taking a lot longer. But the President Biden has recently said that they should be processing, especially for the ones in the US, for like within 6 months. I don't know how they're going to do that. They have to hire more people to do that. So the other one is relatives of US citizens. In this one, a brother or sister can file for their sibling. Unfortunately, it's right now for countries, the wait times is different for different countries. For countries like Nigeria or other countries in Africa, it's taking about 13 to 15 years for that to mature. So that means if you file for your brother or sister, a US citizen, it has to be a US citizen, a permanent resident cannot file for their brother or sister and cannot file for their parent. They have to be US citizens first. So that one takes a really long time before you can get it. The other category is a fiancé, what we call a K-1 visa, the fiancé visa, where somebody, maybe a US citizen or permanent resident, meet somebody, and then, at least they have to meet them in person one time, and then they can stay back here, file a K-1 visa for them. And then once the fiancé comes in, they have 90 days within which to get married. If they don't get married within 90 days, they have overstayed and they become undocumented. So this process is supposed to be a lot quicker, but it also takes about 2 years. Some people say, why don't you just go ahead and get married to the person, instead of waiting for 2 years and then coming here and then they start the process all over again. So those are the ways that a family member can file for you. The second category is employment-based migration. And under employment-based migration, there's what we call EB1. There are different categories. There's EB1 to EB5. That's employment-based preference category. The first one is the priority workers. And that one is for people who have extraordinary ability in the sciences, arts, education, business, or athletics. So it's going to be, people who come here to play basketball, or people who are, Nobel laureates, that kind of a thing. It can also be outstanding professors and researchers, right? Like professors in the universities. And then some multinational managers and executives. For instance, big companies, multinational corporations who bring their managers to come and work here for some time or permanently. So that's the first preference category. Their visa is always current. That means there's no wait time. But because of the backlog, everything takes a little bit longer. The other one is what is called the EB2. The EB2 is the second preference category, and it's for those who are members of the professions, holding advanced degrees, or who have exceptional ability. So this one is for people who have anything from like a master's degree and up. You have a master's, could have a PhD or a doctorate or a doctorate, that kind of thing. So having that advanced degree, you can get a permanent residency through that if an employer files for you. But you can self-petition. This category is one category where you can self-petition, right? You can self-petition for yourself without having the need to have a job offer from an employer in the US. And that means that you're not going to need what we call a labor certification. Labor certification alone takes like a year for the employer to get it. And they have to prove that they couldn't find any US workers that were able to fit that role. And so that's why they had to go outside the US to get you. So it could be for people who are right here in the US, for instance, students who come in here and then they study, maybe they do their master's or did their PhD, and then they have their 1 year OPT, optional practical training. And then during that period, they self-petition for themselves with the national interest waiver. And that, to qualify for that, you have to show that you are bringing something of value to the US, that you're very important to the US. And that's why it's in the US's national interest to waive the requirement of a job certification. That's what that one is for. Their visa is always also very, always current, but because of the backlog, it's taking about 2 years now before you can adjust status using that. The other one is EB3, right? So what? We've done EB1, EB2, EB3. EB3 is for skilled workers, professionals, or other types of workers. These are people who have at least 2 years of job experience or education or training, and they have to meet the job requirements specified on the labor certification. This one, a US employer must file for you, and they have to get a labor certification before they can file for you, okay? And the person has to be performing work for which qualified workers are not available in the US. Then under professionals, you must demonstrate that you possess a US, what we call the first degree in Nigeria, or a foreign equivalent. So anybody that has a first degree in Nigeria or any part of the world, and you have it assessed by WES, and they say it's equivalent to a US undergrad degree, that will qualify you. But this one's an employer must file for you. The other one is the unskilled workers. Unskilled workers are people who have at least 2 years of training or experience, and the job they're coming to do is not temporary or seasonal in nature. So it's a very, very specific qualifications the person has to have. And this one too, you need labor certification. A US employer must file for you. Then the next one is EB4. Under EB4, these are for people in the fourth preference category. If you're a special immigrant includes those who are religious workers, special immigrant juveniles, certain broadcasters, officers or employees of G4 international organizations or NATO countries, certain employees of the US government who live abroad with their family members, and all that. Most people in Nigeria and Africa will not qualify for this, right? Except for religious workers. That's the R1 visa. And the R1 visa, a church which is international, has to have, branches both in your country of origin and in the US. And they're sending you here to come and live and work here. And they will grant you that status for the first 5 years, after which the church will then petition for you to adjust status to become a permanent resident. Then the last employment-based type of immigration is the EB5, which is called the immigrant investor. This is for people who come to the US. They want to invest at least $500,000 in a targeted employment area, like in rural areas of America, to provide employment to people, or $1 million. Okay, so this is for the big boys this is for people who have money and they want to come and invest it here in a company. It cannot be that you've come to buy a house and then you use that house. That won't qualify. And you cannot be employed in the company. So it could be an existing US company that you're putting this money into, investing this money into, or a new company that you come here and you form, and then you put in this money, and then you have to employ a certain number of Americans in order to qualify for this one. So the other one is under this category is also physicians with national interest waiver. The physicians, people who come here to work as physicians, but the catch is they have to work for at least 5 years in an underserved community, like a rural community in America. So they give them that in order to come in here and work. So those are the different ways. And then there are other ways of coming, for instance, refugees, right? If you're a refugee, you can apply to come in as a refugee, like countries where there's war, where there's some kind of a natural disaster, catastrophes going on, or health challenges, like when we had Ebola. People like that can, or even like Ukraine now, what's going over there, they're allowing them to come in as refugees and apply. The other one is diversity immigrant visa program. Unfortunately, countries like Nigeria don't no longer qualify, but I think Ghana and the rest of them still qualify. So that's another way of migrating to the US. The other ways under this category, are very, very specific to certain countries. So that's that. Then there's another way too, called the humanitarian or significant public parole for individuals outside the US. So if somebody has a huge, a very, very urgent matter for which they will migrate, these categories include to receive medical treatment in the US, or to be an organ donor, to reunite with families for urgent humanitarian reasons, or to care for, provide support to a seriously or terminally ill relative in the United States, or to attend a funeral, or to settle the affairs of a deceased relative in the US. So those are, non-immigrant ways of coming to the US for specific times. The other one is asylum. Now, asylum is for people who are already in the United States, right? And asylum, you have to file asylum at the port of entry. So let's say you come in through the airport. Once you get there and they're inspecting you, that's when you tell them that you have a credible fear that will prevent you from returning to your country of origin. And right from there, they will then process your asylum case. And of course, you go through the process. It takes time of going to immigration judge to look at your case and see if you have a credible reason for seeking asylum. Or you can seek asylum within the first 1 year of entry into the United States. So let's say, for instance, you come in here, you had no intention of staying back here, and then maybe something changes in your country, like maybe there's an outbreak of a huge disease, or maybe, your life is being threatened by Boko Haram or that kind of a thing. Then you can stay here within the first 1 year to file asylum. Another special way of migrating is victims of human trafficking and other crimes. So anybody that has been trafficked, into the US or in the process, or maybe they're in another country and all that, they can seek some kind of immigration benefit, but they have to come in with what is called the T non-immigrant visa or the U non-immigrant visa. That means they have to go to a US embassy somewhere outside the US to get this type of visa. And then when they come in here, they can then process them. And after some statutory period, they can get their green card. Another category is people who have suffered female genital mutilation or cutting. This is against the law in the US to perform this inhumane treatment against women. Is actually abuse, and physical and mental abuse against women. Anybody that has suffered it or is about to suffer it, and then they have a credible fear that this will happen to them or their kids, can seek a green card refuge in the US based on those things. Another one is forced marriage. Child marriage, where maybe they are forcing a child, of maybe underage child. Any child under the age of 18 is a minor. So they're trying to force you into a marriage and all that. The person can seek some kind of immigration relief based on that. Then there are other categories now called the non-immigrant work visas. Chief among them is the H-1B visa. The H-1B is for specialty occupations and people who come here to work. I see a lot of, like, even in my office, a lot of Indians, Chinese people, most of them, all these tech people, they come from India, they process their H-1B visas for them. Now, under this category, the H-1B visa is given for 3 years. It's a non-immigrant visa, right? It doesn't have any pathway to citizenship, right? It's non-immigrant, it's not an immigrant visa. So it's supposed to be temporary. So they come in here, the first 3 years, if you're done, you go back to your country. But if your employer wants to keep you, then they have to renew it for another 3 years. That's the maximum they can renew it. So total of 6 years. And then after 6 years, the employer can then file for green card for you to continue living in America. So that's it. Then there are other little H2A categories, seasonal agricultural workers in the US, because we have South America and all that bothering us. People, coming here to pick the seeds and all that in the farm, work in the farm. They're seasonal. They get this type of visas, come in here, work, and then go back to their countries. So those ones are totally non-immigrant in nature. And that's about it. That's about, the general overview of what migration to the US looks like, or to be able to come in and live here and work here in the United States.
Now, Frances, this is, very, very, very direct and very insightful and very straight to the point. And listen, I have some questions for you from people that put in this question. So one of the questions I want to ask you, and I know that you have you touched on it a bit, but sometimes people want to hear you say exactly, give answers to the questions exactly. So one of the questions here is, can one migrate with siblings to the United States of America?
Like I said before, one of the categories of family-based petition is when a sibling can file. The sibling has to be a US citizen living in the United States. And once they file the I-130 petition for alien relative, it's going to take about 13 to 15 years for that to mature. So there's no way a sibling will be migrating to the US and be able to take their siblings. No, it's not possible. The only way you can bring your sibling to the United States is when you're a US citizen, living and working here, you can support them and all that, and then you file for them. And then after about 13 to 15 years, then their visa will become current, and then they will come to the United States. So they can bring them, but they can't like come and migrate with them in that sense.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
This is wow. And there's another question here. Which of the immigration process is, well, faster and better? Academics or skilled worker?
So remember, those are two non-immigrant visa categories, right? If coming here as a student, you just come in to study, right? Of course, that's quicker. Once you get your admission offer to come and study in the US, before, like, first of all, I came to the US as a student. I came in here as a student. Once I get my my F1 from my I-20 rather, from my law school, I came here to study law. They sent it to the US Embassy, and I emailed the US Embassy. That was their practice then. And then they gave me an interview date 2 days later. I'm like, oh no, I'm still in the US, right? Because I came to visit and then decided to go to school. So I said, no, I'm not ready to come. I have to come back to Nigeria first. So I went back and then I processed it. So it's really, really fast. But these days, because of the delays with the pandemic and Trump era policies, so much backlog. So what they're doing is they make you wait till a month to when your school will start. When it's like almost time for school to start, that's when you then email the US Embassy and then they'll invite you for an interview. I have one of my nieces that came last year to study her MSN in nursing. And that's what happened to her. She came in 2 weeks before school started. So that is very, very fast. The other temporary workers that you talked about, that one, an employer has to file for you. They have to file the I-140, and then they have to file a labor certification. It takes years. So that takes a longer time. So coming here as a student is a lot faster.
Okay. Now there's this question I want to ask you. So assuming I go to the United States of America and my friends, nudge me on to say, oh yeah, Ibi, you can actually stay in America. Why don't you get a job? And I apply for a job. I'm just saying, right? Because that's the kind of things that people that don't live, abroad think, that you can get a job and stuff. So I apply for a job. Can I straight up work in the company, or how do I, put myself in the process of regularizing myself as a worker there?
So you cannot work in the United States without a valid work authorization. Right?
Because people think they can. People think that when I just reach there, I will just go find work. That's the way sometimes we think.
So yeah, I mean, people work without authorization, right? The bad part of that is if you do that and maybe later you're able to adjust your status, right? And they find out that you've been working without authorization, they can deny you. I remember some years back, many years back, I had a friend of mine who is a doctor here, and he told me his brother and the wife came here as professors. They were teaching at the university. They did their master's, did the PhD, and they were graduate assistants and all that. And then at some point, their work authorization expired. And while they were waiting to renew it, right, they continued working. So guess what? At the time the school filed for them, they found that they were working without authorization for like 3 months. They denied them, and they continue to live in the US without any kind of status till today. So those are the kind of things there are risks that are not worth taking. And again, like I said, if you have a visa, you come into the US, they're going at the US border, they're going to stamp the number of months that you can stay. Most times they will give you 6 months. Once your 6 months expires and you don't leave, you become illegal. right? That language become illegal, undocumented, whatever. And once that happens, you can't adjust your status to anything except if you fall in love with a US citizen and you get married and then they file for you, right? That US citizen then is able to mitigate that inadmissibility that you have. If the person you fall in love with is a permanent resident, right? You will be able, they can file for you, and they can approve it. But for you to adjust status, they will tell you to leave the US and go to a consular office somewhere else. You can go to Canada if they can take you, or go to anywhere, go back to your country of origin. Unfortunately, once you leave the United States, you can come back depending on the number of days. They count it in days, depending on the number of days that you've overstayed. Oops. Either the 3-year or the 10-year bar will kick in. That means you're barred from entering the United States for the next 3 years. If you stay up to 90 days after your legal stay expires, you're barred for 3 years. If you stay beyond 180 days, you're barred for 10 years. So the only way to overcome that is to, before you leave, is to file what is called
That's good.
A waiver. You file an 601 or 602 inadmissibility waiver. That waiver, you're going to say why you should be allowed to come back into the US. Maybe you have children here, you have minor children. It's going to be a hardship to them when you leave, and your US citizen spouse or your permanent resident spouse. So there are things you have to give them, and a lawyer has to file that for the person, right? So once you get the 601 or 602 waiver approved, then you can go with it. So that when you're coming back, once you get
after 3 years or 10 years.
No, you can overcome that by the waiver. If you're able to apply for the 601, 602 inadmissibility waiver, right? Once you get the waiver, then that waiver will allow you to come back in without having to wait for 3 years or 10 years.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, the next question again that I want to ask you is, assuming I have a minor child, right? And I take that minor child to go to America, and I leave that minor there, and the minor goes to school,
right,
secondary school, and goes to university, a community college or something like that. Can that minor regularize his stay in future?
So
accompanied.
Yes. So every child in the United States, it doesn't matter if you're a US citizen, you're undocumented or anything, they have the right to education up until the 12th grade, right? Which is like secondary school. Nobody's going to ask you questions. They go to grade 1 up until grade 12. But by the time he gets to go into college or community college, they're going to require your papers, right? So in this case, the child has no status. They're going to require to file for an F1 visa, which is a student visa. Unfortunately, at that point, they're already out of status. They won't be able to adjust here. The only way they can do that is what we call the DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, which President Obama started way back when he was here. And that's for exactly the situation that you explained, Ibi. And it's for children who come here as kids. Maybe their parents brought them here, abandoned them, or left them, or if the parents could be living here, it doesn't matter. If you were brought as a kid, right, and a child here is under the age of 18. So if you were 17, right, and you were brought here as a child and you don't have people, that's it, you're qualified. So a lot of people got, some kind of work authorization, some kind of minimal stay, but it's still in Congress. It's still up for debate. They haven't really given them a pathway to citizenship. That means they can't become permanent residents, US citizens, until Congress passes that law. But right now, by executive action of President Obama and President Biden, it's still ongoing. President Trump tried to do away with it, but thank God, Congress did not allow it. So it's still there. And once that child reaches the age of majority, the only other way to adjust is to fall in love with a U.S. citizen of permanent resident. Yes, that's it. You fall in love, you get married, and that's it. You can adjust. And that also goes for even for parents. Let's say you bring your parents. Say, I've had the same doctor that the sister was, his mother was here, right? And he had siblings here who were all American citizens, and the mother didn't have the papers. I'm like, why? And he's like, okay, she came here, she overstayed law. I'm like, you guys, any of you can file for her. She doesn't have to go back tonight. Nothing happens to her, because once your child is a US citizen, it overcomes that inadmissibility. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, now, assuming I have a child that is a US citizen, and that child is not up to the fileable age for me, so the child is not up to 18. And okay, so I go to America with the child, and somewhere in between, I'm like, you know what? My child is a citizen, so I want to stay back.
Right.
Does that give me any immunity?
Not until they turn 21 and they can file for you. So if they're under the age of 21, they can file. They have to be, before it used to be 18 years, and then they changed it to 21. So the child has to be at least 21 years of age, and then they can file for you. And yes, you can adjust while you're here, even though you've been undocumented for as many years as possible, right? So yes, it can be done, but the child has to turn at least 21.
And I want to drill deep again.
Okay.
Listen, I don't want to put you on the spot. A lot of people in Nigeria are in this situation.
Right.
So if the child is underage, the US citizen is underage, and somehow Nigeria is very hard. I'm like, man, I realize I want jackpot, that kind of way, and the person now goes to America. Will the person, the citizen's parent, be deported?
If you commit a crime, if you commit a deportable crime and they get you, yes. But if you're laying low, just waiting for your child to turn 21, you're not doing anything to trigger any kind of attention by law enforcement, right? Then yeah, you can wait. I have a friend who is waiting. She's been waiting for years, just keeping it on the down low. So yeah, it can be done, but you don't get any benefits as the parent of a US citizen child just by virtue of being a US citizen parent, right? You don't get any health benefits or anything. No, you don't, until the child turns 21 and they file an I-130 for you, and then you file your I-485 adjustment of status along with it. No questions asked, they will give you the paper.
Okay. I still want to ask that question because a lot of people are in that situation. Now, when you say, so long as you don't commit any offense so how do you stay away from trouble? Can you drive? Can you work? How do you support your family and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, people take all sorts of risks here, And again, it depends on the state where you live. There are states that are called sanctuary states. California, New York, a couple of them even give driver's licenses to undocumented people. California, I think about 27 states right now that do that. Texas, where I am, is a Republican state. They don't like immigrants. In fact, when I came to Texas newly in 2017, the state legislature passed a law that the police have the right to stop anybody driving and ask you for your papers. That is unconstitutional. You have no right to do that. The police is there performing their police functions, because of the police powers that they get from the state. They are not immigration. They are not there to enforce any kind of immigration law. It also happened in Arizona. And then I think when Obama was there, they were able to strike down that law and actually prosecuted the police commissioner in that place that was enforcing that unconstitutional law. So it all depends on the state where you go to. There are states that are friendly to immigrants and there are states that are not. Texas is one of those states. We have very, very harsh, they don't have any kind of sympathy for immigrants. If you look at what's happening in the border right now, because of what we call Title 42, that was instituted by President Trump. which I think is going to expire on the 23rd of May. So President Biden is saying, I'm not going to renew it. You have to allow these people who are seeking refuge from their countries where they have natural disasters, where they are dying of hunger, to come in. So depending on the state where you are, you can, people take risks. People can come here and drive with them. If they catch you, that's the problem. If you're caught, I remember back in, just when I finished law school, 2012, one of the first immigration cases that I did was a guy that was under immigration hold, right? He's a Spanish guy, and he was living with his girlfriend and kids. Girlfriend didn't have paper, he didn't have paper, but the children were born here. Yeah. Okay. And then he threatened her with a knife, right? And domestic violence. She called 911. And then the police came, took him, and all that. And while the case was going on, ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement is ICE, they then put a hold, an immigration hold on him, right? So his state-appointed attorney then was contacting me because the brother talked to me to represent him and all that. And he was saying, okay, since there's an immigration hold on him, you have to step in so they don't deport him, right? So I went to a prison in, they finished the case, the domestic violence case, and then ICE took him in detention in their own holding cell. It was a very far place in California, and I went there. I went with my interpreter and all that, I was able to talk to him and stuff like that. And then, because he committed a crime, he's done it like twice or so. So once the police got a hold of him, immigration was able to, once you have a criminal record, because you're fingerprinted in everything, once you have a criminal record, you're in danger of being deported by immigration. So unfortunately for him, the brother didn't pay on time. And then a day before he was due to be deported, he comes to me and say, hey, I need to do this. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not traveling, I'm traveling. And then I sent him to another attorney to handle the case, So those are the kind of situations where the person can be deported. Obama actually did a lot of deportation for criminals. That's the thing. They're not looking for regular individuals, right? Who are just going about their business, working and all that. I mean, some undocumented people have tax ID. They pay taxes in the US. Some undocumented people, right? So it's all going to show down when you actually want to adjust. If you're adjusting based on marriage to a US citizen, all that working with that paper, no matter. But if you're now adjusting under maybe your spouse is a permanent resident, that's a problem at that point.
Okay, what about securing? I'm just, asking all these questions for people who are thinking. I'm thinking for people.
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. What about accessing healthcare as, again, a parent of a U.S. citizen's child that is underage?
Like I said, it gives you no benefits in the US. You're not supposed to be a charge to public funds or anything like that, right? But if you come here and you don't have paper and you're pregnant, you're going to have health insurance because of the US citizen child you're carrying. You're going to have health insurance for, I think, a year and a couple of months, right? So that means you'll have that health insurance throughout your pregnancy, when you deliver the baby and everything. You don't pay anything. Okay, if you can, you have to show that you're indigent, you don't have money, blah, 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 which is one of the problems the Republicans have against the Democrats here. Oh, these people come here, they have the best healthcare, they don't have paper and stuff like that. Yeah, again, depending on the state. So my first, the state where I went to school is Massachusetts. They have awesome, robust healthcare system. Okay, they will cover everything for immigrants or non-immigrants, or whoever is there, they're gonna cover. So everything else depends on state law. America, we have some federal laws, and then every other thing is controlled by state law. So it could be particular to the states. California, yes, you could get some. Obamacare made it possible for people to get some kind of coverage, right? But it's not a guarantee. And to that, let me talk about people who come here to have babies, right? In 2017, I met this couple. They came from Nigeria. Incidentally, the guy is a lawyer in Nigeria, and they came in here and they said they had the money to pay their bills. And I said, make sure you pay your bills. If not, you're not going to be able to come back to the US. And so when she had the baby, the husband said, when she went to the hospital, they said, oh, since they asked her for her social security number, her paper, and she said, I don't have any. She said, it's okay. We'll take care of that, take care of the baby. And she had the baby through CS, So after she had the baby, they left. And the husband refused to pay. And I'm like, if you guys want to continue coming to the US, you've got to pay this bill, because they are denying people visas from Nigeria and other countries when you don't pay your bills. So they didn't pay. And they left. Guess what? I think after 2 years, the hospital sends them a huge bill of over $15,000 to pay, because the state refused to pay because it didn't have any kind of health insurance. So, and then people who come here and then maybe their kid turns 21 and they want to come. That's another issue they're going to face. I have a friend, like I said, who is, we were talking before we went live, told you about my friend who is both Irish and Nigerian, and her kid turned 21 in 2018. It's taken her 4 years. She just got her visa last week, right? So when she got it, I said, Joyce, make sure you have your receipt from the hospital. I'm like, oh my God, I can't even remember. I said, look at her birth certificate, the hospital, call them, make sure you're not owing. She did everything. Thank God she got it. But if you don't pay your bills, 21 years later, it's coming back. They will ask you, and they're going to know that you didn't pay those bills, and they will ask you to pay that bill. And if it's like $10,000 or $15,000, you have to cough it up. So that's another common mistake that people make. Yeah, this long-term one.
Oh, wow. And Frances, this is so enlightening. Now, you talked about Ireland, so, well, that strikes home. Yeah. So as an Irish person, there's this E2 visa. What's that?
For the Irish?
Yeah, the E2 visa. There's
a visa US?
called the E2 visa. Do you know anything about
it? EB2. Yeah. So the EB2 is another type of work visa, right? What immigrant employment-based visa, right? It can be filed by those here in the US or outside the US. It's either you have exceptional ability or you have an advanced degree, master's degree, doctorate, PhD, a doctor, a medical doctor, anything like that. Pharmacist who has a PharmD. Like in the US now, pharmacy is 5 years and they have the PharmD, that's the pharmacy doctorate in pharmacy, that kind of a thing. Those are people that can petition. An employer can file an EB2 and then go through the process of getting the labor certification, which is a long process. Or you yourself can self-petition. Like Ibi, you have a master's degree and all that, and you want to file for yourself. Yeah, you can absolutely do that. You get an attorney here in the US to do that for you. But it takes time. Like I said, there is no easy, quick pathway or cheap pathway to come to migrate. It's expensive. You're going to pay immigration their fees. Their fees sometimes run into thousands, depending on what you're filing, thousands of dollars. Yes. And then you pay for your immigrant visa. All that adds up, and then you pay for the medical records and stuff like that. All those things are expensive cumulatively over the time that you come, and then you pay the attorney thousands of dollars to file it. So, just want people to understand there's no easy, fast, cheap way of coming to the US. There are it's expensive. It's a drag on you, whether you're waiting back in Nigeria for a sibling for 13 years or 15 years, or you're waiting for your spouse, or you're waiting for your parents or your children to turn 21 to file for you. It's a long process. So the best thing is to be patient, make sure you have your money together, make sure you have everything. And then apart from that, I think President Biden has done away with it. When Trump was here, he was saying that any immigrant that is coming has to prove that they have the financial ability to care for themselves. So there was a form that you have to fill to say that if you don't, so they were turning, if you don't have the money, then they won't let you migrate, even if it's your child or spouse that filed for you, which is unconstitutional. So thank God it's no longer part of our immigration laws right now, So finally, immigration, at least in the US, immigration is a very fluid area of law, right? The laws can change any day. this could be policy coming down. They're bringing down policy all the time, either from the president or from Congress or from it's federal law, right? So it changes all the time. Last week, there was another law that was passed. Maybe next week, there'll be another one. Even the EB5, you used to like, if you want to invest in a regional investment center, you just give them the money and that's it. But now they stopped it. You have to actually have a going business. So it's so many, and immigration is an area. Another mistake people make is they think they can do it themselves.
Okay.
Without having to hire a competent, experienced attorney. You don't know the pitfalls. So the best thing, and then people end up making huge mistakes, along the line. But if you have, even before you think of migrating from your country where you are, it's better to, consult an attorney, an experienced attorney here in the US, who will tell you exactly what steps to take so you don't make any mistakes. Even for ordinary non-immigrant visa. I've handled a couple of cases in Nigeria many years back when people who were barred from coming to the US. And at the end of the day, after she submitted her documents, I saw that she was coming here to trade, and she told them that she came here and she bought a car for somebody for business. Well, your visa is a visitor visa, is not for business. So based on that, they barred her for 10 years. And I had to write the embassy over and over again before they started giving her visas. Another important one is coming here to commit any kind of fraud or stealing, shoplifting, stuff like that. I once had a client back in 2015.
Long time ago.
Yeah. Unfortunately, she came here, shoplifted and all that. Yeah, and they found that, and they barred her for about 10 years. But at the end of the day, I was able to file a waiver for her, and then they started giving her the visa. So those are just the common things that people do. Anybody that needs any kind of private consultation can contact you with specific questions. This is just a general overview of pathway to a migration to the US. But if anybody wants to consult based on their own private, personal situation, then they can contact you for further information.
Fantastic. Now, I want to quickly read out something that someone wrote here.
Okay.
Joyce Ogunyemi says, well done, girl, as professional as they come. Now, before we go, okay, I want to ask you this question. You made mention of it, but I want you to elaborate on it, because I know that people are really thinking about relocating anywhere, So before thinking about relocating to the United States of America, what are the things you need to consider? So for example, I'm in Nigeria now, and I'm thinking about, I want to relocate to America. If only I can, relocate to America. What are the things that I need to think about realistically?
Yeah.
Before I venture into that journey of relocating?
So the first thing will be to determine which any of these categories that you fall under, right? That you can take advantage of. First of all, determine that. Secondly, once you determine that, like I said, try to consult an attorney privately that will give you some advice based on your special situation. They're going to ask you if you have a parent here, if you have a US citizen, anybody in your family that can file for you. They'll ask you those questions. And then they might also ask you about employment. Do you have anybody interested in you over here in the US? And a tip I can give you right away about employment is people in the tech sector, right? Like I told you, there's a lot of H-1B people coming from India, from Asia, because they have all their tech expertise. I remember in our office back before the pandemic and we stopped going to the office altogether, we used to call that place the Indian section. If you go there, they speak their language. In America, they're busy speaking, they have their people there, right? So that's another way. And then you have to think about when you come here, because when you come here, let's say somebody files for you, an employer or a US citizen, you're not going to be able to access public funds. Public funds means free healthcare or free food, or what we call Section 8 housing, people who are indigent, people who are on welfare, who don't have anywhere to live and the government pays for them, you're not going to be able to access all that. If you do, then your sponsor is going to be responsible for you, because your sponsor is going to be able to sign an agreement, right? A contract, they call it a contract actually, with the US government, saying that they're sponsoring you and that they're going to be responsible for you financially and otherwise. So, you have to think about that. You have enough funds to be able to take care of yourself, come in here, rent a house, pay your bills until you get a job. And that's if you're coming with a work type of visa, either immigrant or non-immigrant. If you're coming here just as a visitor, you're not even thinking about all that, right? And then you're thinking about if somebody is thinking, okay, I'm just gonna get a visa and then I come here. I hear now in places like Nigeria, they don't even have interview dates for non-immigrant visitor visa. Like they're giving people dates next year, as I hear. So, you have to think about all that. And when you come in here, what are you gonna be doing? Whose house will you live in? People think, okay, let me say this. When people come from abroad, right, they go home because the exchange rate is so favorable to us now. You spend money and they think that's how easy it comes. Life is tough over here, right? It's tough. People you've seen that made it here have spent years paying their dues here, situating themselves. So it's not easy. And the funny thing is, practical life experience here. When you're coming, let's say you used to visit from Nigeria, from whichever country, you come to your visiting relatives, it's all fun. They say, oh yeah, come, this one and that one. But once you come to stay, the game changes, because whoever you're going to stay in their house is going to be thinking, this person is going to be running up my bills, my water, my electricity, my air conditioning, my heat. If it's during the winter, I'm going to be feeding them and all that. And, they're going to try to get out of it. So you think about all that. You have family members who can take care of you while you're trying to situate yourself and stuff like that. What else would I say to think about? Yeah, you have to think about healthcare. Yeah. So you do not have, except you're coming in with your immigrant visa. So immediately you come in, you can then get your social security number, try to get Obamacare. If you don't have a job yet, most jobs will offer you healthcare, right? So you pay your premiums through your employer. But if not, you go to the marketplace, go to Obamacare, and then you can get health insurance based on your income. You have to put in the income. If you don't have any income, if your income is less than $7,000 or so a year, then they give it to you for free, something like that. So these are issues like the person needs to talk to their attorney who has formed a attorney-client relationship with them, and their family members that are here. Okay. But if you're coming with money, you come in here, you decide which state in America you're going to live in, then you can go to that state, you can start settling in and stuff. And unless you're coming in to buy a house with your cash, it's going to take you a while to even buy a house, because you can't buy a house with a mortgage if you don't have credit. You have to establish credit in the United States. So that's a different ballgame altogether. There's just so much to it, and you need advice of people who live here to guide you.
Yeah, Frances, we're going to do another show on people who want to buy houses in the United States of America, because I know that you also you have expert
I'm a licensed real estate agent in Texas.
Fantastic. Now, another question I want to ask you is this.
Sorry, before you go to that question, I was going to add something about migration.
Do that.
I heard in the UK that people who are studying or had studied in the UK, they're asking them to come to migrate to the UK, and they will process their indefinite leave to remain. That's a tip to give to the audience right now. The UK is doing that. So this is bad for third world countries. Like, this is brain drain. The best of the best is leaving the country. So now, the UK was doing the migrant program, just like the Canada does. The US doesn't do that, right? So, but the UK had that, and I don't know if it's still on, but right now, since this year, if you finish your education in the UK, your master's or your first degree or your PhD, whatever, you just apply for work authorization, they're going to give it to you. You leave and work in the UK, and after a certain period, you apply for indefinite leave to remain. Now, they extended
regardless of your age?
Regardless, age has nothing to do with it, okay? Nobody is asking about age, even if you're 70 years old, okay? Then they're extending it to people who studied in the UK. If you've ever studied in the UK and you want to migrate, hello, you're welcome. That's the new law that went into effect this year, and a friend of mine in the UK told me about it.
Fantastic. Wow, that's so cool. Oh my goodness. Now, another question I want to ask you, there's a lot of Nigerians who are talented and who are artists who want to sing, and who, singers and people who are very gifted with their hands and all of that. There's an opportunity for them, yeah?
Absolutely. They're in the EB, let me see, I think they're in the EB1 category, preference category. Yes. Very
good.
People with extraordinary abilities in the sciences, athletics, education, and business.
Creativity.
Yeah, it's all part of it. If you can prove, you have to prove, you have to prove with the body of work, right, that you've done. You have to be critically acclaimed. We have to know you in Nigeria. Let's say you're Davido. Davido is a US citizen. And let's say you are Genevieve Naji, right? I'm pretty sure she's not a US citizen. She can migrate to the US based on EB1 if she wanted to. Or any of our musicians, let's say Flav or any of these musicians, they can absolutely migrate. Or people in the sciences, right? People who have, even I see these videos about, young people who, try, like they manufactured like a car or a generator in the village. They are poor and all that. Those kind of people will qualify for EB1 if they are over 18 and they're adults, right? So they will qualify. So
when they qualify for EB1, what happens?
Yes. So they self-petition. They can file domestic, they can get a lawyer here in the US to petition for them domestically on the I-140 form, right? And after that, they will send it to the country or the person is resident for consular processing. Or if there's a field office in that country, they can actually go to that US Embassy field office and petition for themselves there.
And then they can now go there and look for work for themselves and start working, yeah?
When they come here, yes, they can absolutely do that. But it's a very, you see, the employment-based immigrant visas are very technical. You need a lawyer to file it for you. So my advice is to get a competent attorney who is experienced in this area to make this kind of applications for you, because it's very time-consuming to even prepare.
Very good. What about the visa lottery? Do we still do it?
No longer for Nigeria, unfortunately. But I think Ghana is still, they still do it for certain other countries.
Wow. I just want to say that it's been a very enlightening conversation. And listen, if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, please subscribe. It's Ibi Nabo. And if you have any more questions, unfortunately, we can't take any more questions. Feel free to send those questions in to questions@ibspeaks.com, questions@ibspeaks.com, and I will forward those questions to my guest. And next week, I have another very exciting episode, and it's for people who are looking to send their children to go to school in Canada. So I don't want you to miss it. So stay tuned. Frances, any last words?
I just want to say thank you so much, Ibi, for having me today. We've known each other a very long time from Nigeria, Christchurch in Magada. And, it's been awesome. Yeah, we're family friends. Our families are so close. So you're doing great work. I've seen some of your videos and all that you're doing. It's not easy to spend your time doing these videos to educate people on different areas of life. So keep doing what you're doing. Appreciate you, girl.
And Frances, you're going to come and talk to people about property.
Yes,
we're going to do that. Yeah.
Okay.
We're going to do that. So I'm thinking, but I'm not going to give a time, but we'll do that before the end of the year. It's going to be, yes. So I just want to say thank you everyone for watching. I'm highly appreciative of your time and of your, time and of your support. And if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, please subscribe. It's Ibi and you can follow me on Facebook. My Facebook page is Ibi. You can also follow me on my Instagram, it's Ibi, and please like this video. And if you think it was helpful, which is helpful, please share to your friends and family members. And if you need, if you have any more questions, feel free to email those questions to questions@Ibi Speaks. And Francis, I'm going to call you. And
thank you.
Yeah, bye everybody. Bye.
Bye guys.